Hey guys, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about priorities and what, let's call it time investment into different technologies. So you'll know by now if you've watched any of my other videos that I like what I do quite a lot, and I try to learn, like, have a good understanding of as much as possible. But the problem is, and this is something that is true for all things in life, you you have a finite amount of time every day, and there's a finite amount of time that you can spend on any one thing. And since most things, in order to reach a fairly proficient level, requires more time than you'll probably going to have around, you will find yourself in a situation where you have to prioritize different things, and most of the time you're already doing this with you prioritize things you like over things you don't like, and things you need to do over things that you know the drill, right? And this is also true for programming. So a skill that you will in the beginning of things, you don't have this skill, but it's important that you develop it, and you're going to develop it if you pay attention to not just a specific thing that you work with. Like, if you live in your own little world and you don't look at what's happening in the programming world, and you're looking at where the trends are and when the industry is going and all that stuff, if you ignore all of that, then you will be fairly isolated, and you're going to have a very poor understanding of what's relevant and what's not relevant. However, I will say also that if that is your mindset and that's the way that you like progress your career, you're very likely going to be working on the exact same platform for your entire career. And if that's what you want, then that's fine. However, the people who are usually interested in looking around at all these different things will notice that every single tool on the market is saying that they can solve one problem or do something for you, and we are talking about all these opportunities. And as a beginner, I can imagine, and I mean that was the case for me as well, that you get a little bit overwhelmed, like, what do I start with? I mean, there's just so much. And what I did is what I suggest that you do, and you probably, if you're you know, I mean, we're all clever, sexy people, right? You're probably already looking at to find more senior developers who have already been through all of these things, and listening to what they have to say on their experiences and all that stuff. The problem there is that even in the world of experienced developers, you have people who have their own agendas and their own experiences. I mean, it's the same thing with shampoo or politicians or whatever. They're all promising the same thing, and they all seem so trustworthy, right? So which one do you pick? And here I am going to tell you that, well, you can trust me, but it's really up to you to develop that skill to kind of figure out. I mean, in the beginning you have to trust people, and later on, when you get your own experiences and you start getting a feel for what's relevant and what's not relevant, you're going to be able to do it yourself. So what you do is that you try a lot of stuff and see what's good and what's bad, and you keep on failing, basically, or succeeding if you're really good. And you learn what is going to be the thing that you want to bet your money on. Now, the problem is that sometimes you don't know. Like, for myself, if we take me, for example, I have absolutely no idea if some of the technologies in JavaScript land is going to be a good bet or not. Now, I want to believe that I have enough experience to say that I think React is a fairly safe bet. I think that Jest is a fairly safe bet. Even Mocha. I think that Karma is a fairly safe bet. Webpack is a fairly safe bet. I have absolutely no idea if Vue is a good bet. I know that Angular is probably a safe bet depending on what you want to do. And then there are a bunch of other frameworks that's probably not a safe bet. I mean, if you're doing jQuery today, that's not a safe bet, I would say. It used to be, but it's no longer. And what do I mean by a safe bet? Well, a safe bet is basically it's basically a technology that's going to stay relevant for long enough so that the time it takes you to invest in order to master that technology or that framework is going to be less than, and the time that you are going to have that information and find it useful in your daily life is long, like that. It's a longer period, and this is really, really tricky. And unfortunately, this is highly, highly relevant to your ability to progress through your career. So we're always learning new things, but the CV that you're creating as you go along, that's what people are going to read. And if you have a lot of really relevant and really like fancy modern technologies on your CV, that's going to draw a lot of attention. And the jobs that you get, especially in the beginning, are going to be very dependent on your relevance, if you will. And when you get a little bit more senior and maybe you have some high profile companies on your CV, that's going to be more what they're looking for. But after they've done, like after they've looked at the section where did you work, they're going to look at, okay, what do you know? So that this is, think of yourself as having personal stock. Your stock raises based on how much relevant technology you know, and it lowers based on how much irrelevant stuff you have. Like, all experience is good, but most, like, some stock, like for example Java and .NET developers are probably the most stable stock there is. If you can go an entire career just knowing Java and .NET in essence. It is possible because it's such these languages are so massive that the jobs they're not drying up anytime soon. I mean, it will probably be 10, 20, even probably more years before you see that Java and .NET is no longer the main corporate choice. That's my guess anyway. So for us JavaScript developers, this is especially tricky because JavaScript is such a volatile environment and there's so many frameworks coming and going all the time. It's not as much as some people want you to believe, but it is enough so that to be a little bit careful. You should be a little bit careful about what you're betting on. And that puts a lot of pressure on you as a developer because think of it, I almost think of it as being a stockbroker or like a finance geek. You have to look at what the market is doing almost all the time to get a feel for what is going to be a good time investment for you professionally. I like to do, like I learn things that I think is fun, and there's always stuff that is more relevant than not, but there are people out there who are looking into, for example, Elm. And Elm is really not the best, it's not a bad choice, but if somebody came along and told you, if you're a complete beginner, that Elm is a really good choice, start using that immediately, they are lying to your face. I know enough to tell you that Elm is not good first choice. It's not. It is really not. It's a really cool, really trendy functional programming language, but it's microscopic in terms of usage in the industry. There are people who are using it. I'm not saying there's not, but if you compare its usage statistics against React and Angular, even Vue, it is microscopic. To me, Elm is a language that have influenced a lot with some really cool, really great ideas, but it's not anywhere near worth my time, like good enough, like mature enough or adopted enough for me to think that, I'm gonna resaddle, I'm gonna stop this React nonsense or Angular, and I'm gonna go into Elm. If I were to do that, if you started like thinking that I'm gonna go into Elm because that's the future, then I would I would encourage you, don't do that. Like, really rethink that and make sure that because if you don't care, if you don't care how relevant you are in the marketplace, that's okay. Then just do whatever you want. But it's you will. It's like Haskell people. If you're getting into Haskell today, odds are that it will be very hard for you to find a job, most likely. Because no, like I don't think I've ever, like, there's a microscopic amount of companies out in the world who are using Haskell as their main programming language. It's not that it doesn't exist, it's the fact that, compared to other languages, and if, as I said, if your goal isn't to work as a programmer, then go for it. I mean, if you have nothing to lose, go for it. But what I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to bash talk these languages, because every language has something that's great about it. And there are so many things that are great about Elm and Haskell, but I'm simply trying to give you some advice regarding how to position yourself to make a career out of being a programmer. And even if you're building a company, don't forget that things such as relevant technology and languages will help you recruit new people to your cause. Because once again, most companies these days are actually accounting for this as well. I mean, if you standardize on, say, Elixir, I mean, I love Elixir, I really do. It's a great language. But I wouldn't, if I started a new startup company, I wouldn't build my startup with it. And that's because of two reasons. There are better solutions for me to get running quickly and start making some real progress, and finding developers who know Elixir well enough to be a good investment for my company. It's not that likely. Same thing with Erlang and some of these more hard to obscure languages. So what I'm trying to tell you is that you need to stay in touch with, especially if you're in JavaScript, with the community, and look at where the trends are going. Look at just make sure that you're reading the newsletters, you're following the talks, and once in a while go on to the job sites and find out what people are looking for in front-end developers, or any developer for that matter. Because if you get out of touch with that, it becomes very difficult for you to know how valuable you are on the market. So right now, if you are an Angular or a React developer, your value on the marketplace is very, very high in comparison to somebody who only knows vanilla JavaScript or jQuery. And the reason is because the demand is really high right now. So think about these things, because it will help you make to progress in your career. And don't forget, if you get nice jobs and good people around you, your skill level will increase. So even though this is not hardcore, strictly technical things that we're talking about here, it is going to be very important in the long term for your development.